we have situation when Russians have strong motivations towards Belarus, European Union, United States much more less motivations to deal with this, and we have Lukashenko, which can status quo in this situation. But if we will have one day the situation that Lukashenko will just leave us somehow.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
What will be next?
The easy answer is to say, well, it depends what happens in Belarus. Okay, let's say Lukashenko departs more or less smoothly, i.e. he dies slowly or he gradually delegates power to a successor, something like that. Then I think the Russians will be much more closely involved. They will want to ensure, I mean, as you know, there's all sorts of talk about senior Belarus political figures based in Moscow. Now, so the Russians will try and control or manipulate the succession. But this will be interesting. There could be real clashes, I think, between people who are staying in Minsk and people who stay in Moscow. So I don't necessarily see that as completely smooth. But I don't really see conflict at this stage. I think for Moscow, provided Lukashenko's successor is not openly pro-Western, then Moscow will decide that the costs of trying to intervene more actively outweigh the benefits. Because I think, although the Kremlin retains a kind of patrimonial or quasi-imperial mindset towards the ex-Soviet republics, it also doesn't believe in traditional conceptions of empire. It believes in kind of indirect empire. In other words, it wants the influence, but it doesn't want to take the responsibility and risks of running an empire, which is why I think, unless they can do it provided Belarus is not completely prativna, really, then they can live with someone more or less acceptable. That will be enough.
And what in this situation, this framework of Eurasian Union and any kind of development, like political structure, how it can stabilize?
Well, the Eurasian Union, the problem is the Eurasian Union means different things to different members. So for Putin, it's a way of kind of... the main motivation for Putin in the Eurasian Union is to reassert Russia as the dominant geopolitical player in Eurasia. There's a related objective, which is if Russia is able to reassert itself as the dominant geopolitical power in Eurasia, then it can also position itself as one of the centers, one of the poles in a global multipolar order. So this idea of Russia as an independent global center of power. So you have the United States dominates the West, you have China dominating East Asia, and Russia dominates Eurasia. For that to work, however, if it can ever work, but if it is to have any chance of working, Russia needs Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and maybe one or two, ideally Uzbekistan. But is this realistic? No. Because the problem is everyone recognizes that from Moscow's perspective, the goal is a kind of, not empire, but a reassertion of Russian almost hegemonic power. For Kazakhstan, it's an economic project. For Belarus, it's an economic project. So for them, for both of them, sovereignty is key. They will not want to surrender any sovereignty. And that's the biggest problem of the Eurasian Union, that Moscow, Minsk, and Astana have fundamentally conflicting visions. Or rather, Astana and Minsk have one vision, and Moscow has quite a different vision. And I don't see this, and Russia does not have enough hard power or soft power to realize its vision. So Putin will continue to push this Eurasian project through things like the customs union, obviously. He is using more sophisticated means, but he'll use economic means, soft power means. But it is a fundamentally geopolitical project, and this is its greatest weakness for Belarus and also for Kazakhstan.
And if you mention in this game Ukraine, what is the position of Putin and the Russian government to Ukraine in this framework and the position of Yanukovych?
Putin has no respect at a personal level for Yanukovych. He thinks he's a bum, really. And the Russians think of Ukrainians as country bumpkins. They really do. They have little respect for them, I think. They believe that, I think their attitude towards Ukraine is this. No one wants Ukraine. Ukraine is trying to play this balancing game between the EU and Russia. But people are really annoyed. Both the Russians and the Europeans are annoyed at Yanukovych's policies. Ukraine seems as dysfunctional, as disorganized, as corrupt as it always has been. So no one sees any progress in any direction. So the attitude then is, I think what the Kremlin is thinking is, the Europeans don't really want Ukraine. We don't have to give the Ukrainians anything. Eventually they'll realize that they're out of choices. They have no options left because no one wants them. I think this is a mistake because I think Ukraine is quite an attractive country potentially as part of the European project, more so than Belarus, it has to be said. And I think the Russians are a bit complacent, a bit, they think, it's okay, if we just sit tight, Yanukovych will come crawling back to us. This is a mistake. I don't think the Kremlin treats the Ukrainian government treats Ukraine with enough respect. And if I were an advisor to President Putin,